The land of Egypt groaned under the weight of injustice. For generations, the Israelites had lived there as foreigners. At first welcomed, they had grown into a mighty people, blessed by God's promise to Abraham. But Pharaoh, seeing their numbers as a threat, turned their lives into bitter slavery. Whips cracked in the hot sun, and the children of Israel cried out to God for deliverance. God heard their cries. He remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. His eyes were upon his people, and his plan for salvation was already in motion. The man chosen for this mission was someone unexpected, a shepherd living far away from Egypt, in the quiet hills of Midian. That man was Moses, once a child rescued from the Nile, raised in Pharaoh's own palace. Moses had fled Egypt after defending a fellow Hebrew. He had made a life for himself in Midian, tending the flocks of his father-in-law, Jethro. Decades passed, and Moses must have thought his time in Egypt was behind him forever. But God had not forgotten. One day, as Moses led his sheep to the far side of the wilderness, he came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, something caught his eye. A bush burned with fire, yet it was not consumed. Flames danced upon its branches, but the leaves remained whole, untouched by the blaze. Moses drew closer, curiosity stirring within him. Then came a voice. "Moses, Moses," he answered. "Here I am." The voice declared, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Trembling, Moses removed his sandals. He knew he was in the presence of something far beyond himself. The voice continued, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At these words, Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sorrows, and I have come down to deliver them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey." Moses listened, awestruck. Could it be that after centuries, God was moving to rescue his people? Then came the words that changed everything. "Come now, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." Moses froze. Him, the shepherd, the exile, the fugitive. Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He asked. God answered, "I will be with you. And this shall be the sign to you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain." But still, Moses hesitated. "If I go to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me,' and they ask, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God replied with words that echo through eternity. "I am who I am. Tell them, I am has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I will be remembered from generation to generation." Even with this assurance, Moses felt the weight of the task. He worried the people would not believe him. He stammered about his lack of eloquence, his weakness in speech, but God showed patience. He gave Moses signs: the staff that turned into a serpent, the hand that turned leprous and was healed again. God promised that Aaron, Moses' brother, would go with him to speak before Pharaoh. In that moment, Moses realized he could not run any longer. The God who had protected him as an infant, who had spared his life in Egypt, who now revealed his holy name, was calling him to a mission greater than himself. Moses gathered his family and prepared to leave Midian. The journey back to Egypt would not be easy. Pharaoh was powerful, and Moses was filled with doubts. But God had spoken, and his word would not fail. The shepherd was about to become a deliverer. With God's call burning in his heart, Moses set his face toward Egypt. The desert stretched before him, but the weight of the task lay heavier than the sands beneath his feet. His brother Aaron came to meet him, as God had promised. Together they walked toward the land that had once been Moses' home, carrying a message that would shake an empire. When they reached Egypt, the first step was not to face Pharaoh, but to gather the elders of Israel. The Hebrew people had suffered under the lash for so long that hope seemed like a fading memory. Yet when Moses spoke the words of the Lord and showed them the signs, the staff becoming a serpent and his hand healed of leprosy, the people bowed down in worship. For the first time in generations, they believed that God had heard their cries. Strengthened by this, Moses and Aaron entered Pharaoh's court. The palace was vast, lined with stone pillars and decorated with gold. Servants bowed low as Pharaoh sat upon his throne, robed in splendor, the crown of Egypt upon his head. He was a man worshipped as a god, yet about to hear the voice of the true God through his servants. Moses and Aaron spoke boldly. "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh's eyes narrowed. His voice was sharp. "Who is the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go." Moses repeated the command, but Pharaoh's heart was hard. Instead of listening, he turned his anger against the Israelites. He commanded his overseers, "No longer give the people straw to make bricks. Let them gather their own straw, but demand the same number of bricks as before." The people groaned under this new cruelty. They were beaten when they failed to meet the quota. Soon, their faith in Moses began to falter. "May the Lord judge you," some cried, "for you have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials, and put a sword in their hand to kill us." Moses, disheartened, turned back to God. "Why, Lord, have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble, and you have not rescued your people at all." But God's voice came steady and sure. "Now you will see what I will do to Pharaoh. Because of my mighty hand, he will let them go. Because of my mighty hand, he will drive them out of his country. I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, the Lord, I did not make myself fully known to them. I established my covenant with them. I have heard the groaning of the Israelites, and I will bring them out of bondage. I will take you as my own people, and I will be your God." With these promises, Moses' courage grew. Once again, he and Aaron stood before Pharaoh. Aaron cast down the staff before him, and it became a serpent. The court gasped. Pharaoh's magicians, however, performed the same with their own staffs, but Aaron's serpent swallowed theirs whole. Still, Pharaoh's heart remained hard. God had begun to show his power, but Pharaoh was not ready to yield. Each command to let my people go was met with defiance. Pharaoh's pride was like stone, and his refusal would bring judgment not only upon himself, but upon all of Egypt. The stage was set for the mighty hand of God to move. The Israelites still toiled under cruel labor. Moses and Aaron remained obedient to the Lord's voice, waiting for what he would do next. Pharaoh thought himself unshakable, seated in his palace of stone. Yet even the greatest empire cannot stand when the living God rises to deliver his people. Pharaoh's heart remained unyielding, and the people of Israel groaned under their burdens. God had declared that he would show his power not only to deliver his people, but also to make his name known throughout the nations. The time had come for Egypt to witness the might of the Lord. Moses and Aaron once again stood before Pharaoh, repeating the command of the Lord. "Let my people go, so that they may worship me." Pharaoh refused, his pride swelling like a flood. So God instructed Moses to begin a series of signs and wonders that would strike Egypt at its very heart. The first plague came when Aaron stretched out his staff over the Nile. Its waters turned to blood, and the fish within died. The river that was the lifeblood of Egypt became foul and undrinkable. Yet Pharaoh's magicians imitated the act, and Pharaoh's heart grew harder. He would not listen. Next came the plague of frogs. At God's command, frogs swarmed across Egypt. They filled houses, ovens, and kneading bowls. Pharaoh, overwhelmed, begged Moses to pray for relief and promised to let the people go. But when the frogs were gone, Pharaoh hardened his heart once more. Then Aaron struck the dust of the ground, and it became gnats that covered people and animals. The magicians tried but could not reproduce this plague. They declared, "This is the finger of God." Still, Pharaoh would not yield. The fourth plague brought swarms of flies, filling the homes of the Egyptians while sparing the land of Goshen, where the Israelites lived. God was showing a clear division between his people and their oppressors. Pharaoh called Moses again and offered a compromise. But when relief came, he went back on his word. The fifth plague struck the livestock of Egypt. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, and goats died, while the herds of Israel remained untouched. Yet Pharaoh remained stubborn. Then God commanded Moses to take handfuls of soot from a furnace and throw it into the air. It became fine dust that caused painful boils to break out on Egyptians and their animals. Even the magicians could not stand before Moses, for they too were covered in sores. Still, Pharaoh's heart was hard. The seventh plague came as a storm of hail, mixed with fire, the likes of which Egypt had never seen. Crops and livestock left in the fields were destroyed. Yet, in the land of Goshen, no hail fell. Pharaoh, shaken, confessed, "This time I have sinned. The Lord is in the right, and I and my people are in the wrong." He promised to let the Israelites go, but as soon as the skies cleared, he changed his mind again. Next, locusts came upon the land, devouring everything left after the hail. Pharaoh pleaded once more, but when the locusts were gone, he returned to his stubbornness. Then came the plague of darkness. For 3 days, Egypt was shrouded in thick blackness, so deep that people could not see one another or move about. Yet the Israelites had light where they lived. Still, Pharaoh refused to free them. 9 plagues had struck, each one striking deeper at the pride of Egypt and its gods. The Nile god could not protect the river. The gods of fertility could not stop the frogs and locusts. The sun god could not shine through the darkness. Pharaoh, who claimed to be divine, stood powerless before the living God, but his heart remained like stone. He threatened Moses, saying, "Get out of my sight. The day you see my face again, you will die." Moses answered, "As you say. I will never appear before you again." Yet God was not finished. A final plague was coming, one that would break Pharaoh's resistance and open the way for Israel's deliverance. The land of Egypt trembled after 9 plagues, yet Pharaoh's heart remained unyielding. The Lord spoke to Moses with solemn words, for a final judgment was at hand. This last plague would pierce Egypt's pride and bring deliverance for God's people. God declared, "I will bring one more plague upon Pharaoh and upon Egypt. After that, he will let you go. About midnight I will go throughout Egypt. Every firstborn son in Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on the throne to the firstborn of the slave girl at her handmill, and all the firstborn of the cattle as well. There will be loud wailing throughout Egypt, worse than there has ever been or ever will be again. But among the Israelites, not a dog will bark." The Lord then gave Moses instructions for his people, a command that would forever be remembered as the Passover. Each family was to take a lamb without blemish, a year old, and slaughter it at twilight. They were to take some of its blood and put it on the sides and tops of the doorframes of their houses. That same night, they were to roast the lamb over fire and eat it with unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Nothing was to remain until morning. God's command was precise. Eat it in haste, with your cloak tucked into your belt, your sandals on your feet, and your staff in your hand. For this is the Lord's Passover. On that night I will pass through Egypt and strike down every firstborn, both men and animals, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. The blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt. The Israelites obeyed carefully. Each family prepared their lamb, applied the blood to their doorposts, and ate the meal just as the Lord had commanded. The air was filled with an uneasy stillness, for the night was unlike any other. Fathers and mothers gathered their children close, trusting in the promise that the blood would protect them. At midnight, the Lord moved through the land. In every Egyptian household, death struck. From the palace of Pharaoh to the homes of the poor, the firstborn perished. The wailing of grief rose across Egypt, a cry so bitter that it shook the very heart of the nation. But in the homes marked with blood, not a single life was lost. The Lord had kept his word. Pharaoh, shattered by grief, summoned Moses and Aaron in the night. His voice was broken. Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds and go. And also bless me. The Egyptians urged the Israelites to hurry, for fear that death would claim them all. The people packed their belongings, their kneading bowls wrapped in clothing on their shoulders. They left in haste, their bread still unleavened, their eyes wide with wonder at what God had done. The Lord had commanded them to remember this night for all generations. This day is to be a memorial day for you. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations, as a statute forever. Thus began the feast of Passover, a sign of God's deliverance and faithfulness. As dawn broke, the Israelites set out, a great multitude with flocks and herds, carrying the treasures the Egyptians had given them. They were no longer slaves, but a people redeemed by the hand of the Almighty. The night of sorrow in Egypt had become the dawn of freedom for Israel. The blood of the Lamb had spared them. A powerful sign pointing to God's greater deliverance yet to come through the Lamb of God. The people of Israel set out from Egypt with haste. Their hearts pounded with excitement and fear as they left behind the land where they had lived as slaves for generations. At last, they were free. Families walked together, carrying their belongings, their herds following behind. A mixed multitude went with them, witnesses to the power of Israel's God. God himself guided their steps. By day, he went before them in a pillar of cloud. By night, he was a pillar of fire, giving them light so they could travel. The people saw with their own eyes that the Lord was leading them. Yet freedom's path was not easy. When Pharaoh heard that the Israelites had fled, his heart hardened once more. Regret filled him. The sound of mourning in Egypt turned to anger. "What have we done?" Pharaoh cried. "We have let the Israelites go and lost their services." At once, he prepared his chariots, his horsemen, and all the strength of Egypt's army. The ground trembled as 600 of the finest chariots, along with all other forces, thundered across the land in pursuit of the Israelites. The children of Israel camped by the Red Sea, their tents spread out along the shore. Suddenly, a cloud of dust rose on the horizon. The rumble of wheels and hooves grew louder. When the people saw Pharaoh's army approaching, terror seized them. Trapped between the sea and the soldiers, they cried out to Moses, Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." But Moses answered with faith, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water, so the Israelites can go through on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, so they will follow you. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and his army, and all Egypt will know that I am the Lord." The pillar of cloud moved from in front of the Israelites and stood behind them, coming between the two camps. Darkness fell over the Egyptians, but light shone for the Israelites all night. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. With a mighty wind sent by the Lord, the waters parted, rising like walls on the right and on the left. A path of dry ground opened before them. The people stepped forward in awe, walking between the towering walls of water. Mothers held their children close, fathers guided their families, and the vast company of Israel crossed through the sea by the power of God. When Pharaoh's chariots pursued, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud. Panic spread among the Egyptians. Their wheels jammed, and they cried, "Let us flee from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." As the last of Israel stepped safely to the other side, God commanded Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians." Moses obeyed. The sea rushed back into place. Chariots and horsemen, Pharaoh's entire army that had followed the Israelites, were swept into the waves. Not one survived. On the far shore, the Israelites stood in silence, gazing at the sea that had become their deliverance. Then their voices rose in praise. Moses and the people sang to the Lord. "I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation." Miriam the prophetess, Moses' sister, took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines and dancing. Together they sang, "Sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he has hurled into the sea." The Lord had shown his mighty hand. Israel was no longer a nation of slaves, but a people redeemed by the living God. The Red Sea stood as a witness forever, a monument of his power and faithfulness. The waters of the Red Sea closed behind the people of Israel, sealing their freedom. The shouts of praise still echoed as they journeyed into the wilderness. Yet the desert was a harsh place, and the joy of victory soon turned to cries of need. God, however, had not delivered his people to abandon them. He would show them that he was their provider as well as their deliverer. The Israelites traveled into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they found no water. Thirst gnawed at their throats, and hope began to falter. At last they came to Merah, where springs flowed. But when they tasted the water, it was bitter. The people grumbled against Moses, crying, "What are we to drink?" Moses turned to the Lord, and God showed him a piece of wood. When Moses threw it into the waters became sweet and drinkable. There the Lord tested his people and said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right, in his eyes I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." From there, God led them to Elim, where 12 springs and 70 palm trees gave them rest. The journey continued, and the people entered the desert of Sin. Soon, hunger pressed upon them. Once again, they murmured, saying, "If only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death." The Lord answered with compassion, "I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions." That evening, quail covered the camp. The next morning, the ground was covered with thin flakes, white like frost. The Israelites looked at one another and asked, "What is it?" Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat." They called it manna. Each day they gathered just enough, and on the 6th day they gathered twice as much, for on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there would be none. God had provided food in the desert, teaching his people to trust in his daily provision. Yet their trials were not over. At Rephidim there was no water. Again, the people quarreled with Moses, saying, "Give us water to drink." Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." God commanded Moses, "Walk on ahead of the people. Take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile. Strike the rock at Horeb, and water will come out for the people to drink." Moses obeyed, and water flowed from the rock, quenching the thirst of the multitude. The place was named Massah and Meribah, because the people tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" But God's presence was not in doubt. When the Amalekites came and attacked Israel, Moses stood on the hilltop with the staff of God in his hands. As long as he raised his hands, Israel prevailed. But when his hands grew weary, Amalek gained strength. So Aaron and Hur held his hands steady until sunset, and Joshua overcame the Amalekite army. Through each trial, the Lord revealed himself as provider, protector, and warrior. He gave manna for hunger, water for thirst, and victory in battle. The people learned, though slowly, that their survival did not depend on Egypt's abundance or their own strength, but on the faithfulness of the God who had redeemed them. Step by step, God was shaping them into a nation that would know him, trust him, and follow his ways. Ahead lay the mountain of his presence, where he would reveal his covenant to them. The wilderness was not just a place of struggle, it was a classroom of faith. The people of Israel journeyed through the wilderness, guided always by the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. Step by step, God was bringing them closer to his purpose. After 3 months of traveling since leaving Egypt, they came to the desert at the foot of Mount Sinai, the very mountain where God had first called Moses from the burning bush. There, the people camped before the mountain. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "This is what you are to say to the descendants of Jacob, and what you are to tell the people of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Moses went down and summoned the elders. He told the people all that the Lord had spoken, and they responded together, "We will do everything the Lord has said." God prepared them for a holy encounter. For 3 days, they were to consecrate themselves, wash their clothes, and abstain from impurity. Boundaries were set around the mountain, for no one was to approach it carelessly. On the 3rd day, thunder roared, lightning flashed, and a thick cloud covered the mountain. A trumpet blast sounded louder and louder, and the people trembled. Moses led them out to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke, because the Lord descended on it in fire. The mountain shook violently, and the trumpet grew louder still. Then Moses spoke, and the voice of God answered him. God gave his law to his people, beginning with the 10 Commandments. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony. You shall not covet. The voice of God thundered these words, and the people trembled with fear. They said to Moses, "Speak to us yourself, and we will listen. But do not have God speak to us, or we will die." Moses reassured them, "Do not be afraid. God has come to test you, so that the fear of him will be with you to keep you from sinning." Then Moses drew near to the thick darkness where God was. There, the Lord gave further laws and instructions, shaping his people into a holy nation that would reflect his glory. He promised blessings for obedience and warned of consequences for turning away. He commanded them to build an altar and worship him alone. Finally, Moses built an altar at the foot of the mountain and set up 12 stone pillars representing the 12 tribes of Israel. Young men offered sacrifices, and Moses took the blood of the offerings. Half he sprinkled on the altar, and the other half he sprinkled on the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words." Then Moses, Aaron, and the elders of Israel went up the mountain and beheld God's presence. Under his feet was something like a pavement made of sapphire, clear as the sky itself. They ate and drank in his presence, a sign of fellowship with the living God. The Lord then called Moses higher still. For 40 days and 40 nights, Moses remained on the mountain, receiving the tablets of stone inscribed by the very finger of God. The covenant was sealed. Israel was no longer just a people freed from slavery, but a nation bound to the Lord, chosen to walk in his ways. The Exodus was more than an escape from bondage. It was the birth of a covenant people. God had shown his power over Egypt, his provision in the wilderness, and his holiness at Sinai. He had called his people to be his own, to live as a light among the nations, and to carry his promises forward to the generations to come.